In a move that has sent shockwaves across the globe, shattered long-held assumptions, and fundamentally redrawn the geopolitical map of the 20th century, Taiwan has accepted China's new offer. The unthinkable has happened. The steadfast refusal, the commitment to a distinct future, the very cornerstone of Taiwanese identity has yielded. Questions now cascade, urgent and unsettling. What was this offer? Why now? And most critically, what happens next? The consequences of this moment are vast, unknowable in their entirety, but certain to shape the destiny of millions and the global order for generations to come. This is not just a shift in geopolitics, it is an earthquake. Before we dive in, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Because what you're about to hear might just shock you. Now, let's break it down. The acceptance, the unthinkable dawn. The news broke like thunder on a clear day. A sudden, terse announcement from Taipei, confirming that after weeks, perhaps months, of clandestine negotiations, a pivotal decision had been reached. Taiwan, the Republic of China, had formally agreed to the terms presented by the People's Republic of China. The initial communiqué was deliberately vague, speaking of a framework for peaceful development and cooperation, a path to avoiding conflict and ensuring stability. But the subtext was unmistakable, and the implications were chillingly clear to anyone who understood the historical context and the enduring demands from Beijing. Taiwan was accepting a future intrinsically linked and ultimately subservient to mainland control. The immediate aftermath was chaos. In Taipei, stunned silence quickly erupted into raw emotion. News reports, initially cautious, soon showed images of disbelief, anger, and profound sorrow. Protests, both spontaneous and organized, began to materialize in city centers, fueled by a sense of betrayal and the crushing weight of lost sovereignty. For many Taiwanese, particularly the younger generation who had grown up in a vibrant democracy, this acceptance felt like the theft of their identity, the extinguishing of a hard-won freedom. The ideals of self-determination, of a distinct national future, forged over decades and reinforced by free elections and a unique cultural evolution, seemed to evaporate in an instant. Across the Taiwan Strait, in Beijing, the reaction was a carefully orchestrated display of triumphant rhetoric. State media declared a historic victory for the principle of One China, hailing the agreement as the inevitable culmination of national rejuvenation. There was talk of reconciliation, of unity, but underlying the official pronouncements was an undeniable tone of assertiveness, of a long-held claim finally being realized. For decades, the PLA's modernization, the constant military exercises, the diplomatic isolation of Taiwan, it all pointed towards a singular objective. And now, through means yet fully understood, that objective appeared within grasp, seemingly without the need for the direct military force that the world had long feared. The terms of this new offer, as they began to trickle out through leaks and official statements, were complex but fundamentally aligned with Beijing's core demands. While presented as a pathway to peaceful integration, they involved significant concessions from Taipei. Foremost among these was the acknowledgement, in some form yet to be fully deciphered, of Beijing's ultimate sovereignty over Taiwan. This was a departure from the long-standing ambiguity of the 1992 consensus and a fundamental shift from Taipei's position of the Republic of China existing independently. The offer likely included promises of economic benefits, continued cultural exchange, perhaps even a degree of local autonomy, but all firmly within the overarching framework of the PRC. It was not one country, two systems as proposed for Hong Kong, which itself has been systematically dismantled. This new offer appeared designed for deeper, more immediate integration, a more direct path to Beijing's control, albeit potentially phased over a period of time. The exact mechanisms of this transition remain deliberately opaque, adding another layer of anxiety and uncertainty. Why did Taiwan accept? The full geopolitics and analytics behind this decision are multifaceted and likely involved immense pressure, both internal and external. Speculation is rampant. Was it the culmination of relentless economic coercion? A perceived lack of reliable international support in the face of escalating military threats? Internal political divisions reaching a breaking point? or perhaps a realization by some faction within the Taiwanese leadership that the cost of continued resistance, the risk of a devastating conflict, had become too high? The acceptance suggests a complex interplay of factors, a moment where the perceived alternatives became untenable. It marks a profound and agonizing choice, one that history will judge with immense scrutiny. The dawn of this new era is shrouded in disbelief and apprehension. The fabric unravels inside Taiwan's turmoil. The acceptance of Beijing's offer did not bring peace, it ignited a different kind of conflict within Taiwan itself. The veneer of unity shattered, revealing deep fissures in society. For decades, Taiwan has been a vibrant democracy, a beacon of freedom in Asia, a place where diverse political viewpoints clashed fiercely but ultimately peacefully within a system governed by the rule of law. That system, that consensus around a distinct Taiwanese identity and a democratic future, is now under unprecedented strain. The streets of Taipei, Kaohsiung, and other cities became stages for raw, passionate protests. Thousands, then tens of thousands, took to the streets, their voices raw with anger and despair. They chanted slogans demanding independence, condemning the leadership that had made the decision, waving flags that represented the democratic Taiwan they felt was being surrendered. There were clashes with police, moments of tension as barricades went up and tear gas was deployed. These were not abstract political demonstrations. They were expressions of a people grappling with the potential loss of their fundamental rights, their way of life, their very sense of self. Many held signs referencing Hong Kong, a stark warning of the potential future, the erosion of freedoms, the crackdown on dissent, the imposition of a different legal and political order. But the protests were not the only reaction. There was also resignation, particularly among older generations who had lived through the Civil War era and harbored a deep-seated fear of conflict. For some, the acceptance of the offer, however unpalatable, was seen as a pragmatic, albeit painful, necessity to avoid the unimaginable devastation of war. There were those with close economic ties to the mainland who saw potential opportunities, believing that integration, while politically costly, could bring prosperity. There were families torn apart by differing viewpoints, intergenerational divides widening into chasms. A taxi driver interviewed on the street, his face etched with worry, spoke of his children wanting to leave the island, seeking a future free from Beijing's influence, while he felt too old to uproot his life. A student, tears streaming down her face, spoke of feeling like a stranger in her own country overnight. The island's robust media landscape, a hallmark of its democracy, became a battleground of information and disinformation. Traditional outlets grappled with how to report on a reality that defied decades of independence-leaning sentiment. Social media platforms buzzed with fear, speculation, and conflicting narratives. Beijing's state media apparatus, meanwhile, ramped up its messaging, emphasizing the benefits of reunification, portraying the protests as the actions of a small, misguided minority, and promising a stable, prosperous future under mainland rule. The information war, long a component of cross-strait tensions, entered a new, more intense phase, aiming to shape public opinion and normalize the new reality. Institutions within Taiwan also faced existential challenges. The legislature, the judiciary, the independent media, all cornerstones of its democratic system, now operated under the looming question of their future autonomy. Would they be gradually dismantled, absorbed into the PRC's system, or allowed to function with significantly curtailed powers? The uncertainty created a paralysis, a sense of operating on borrowed time. The military, long trained to defend the island from invasion, now faced a complex and demoralizing scenario. Their mission had fundamentally changed overnight. The fabric of Taiwanese society, woven with threads of democratic idealism, resilience, and a distinct national identity, is unraveling under the immense pressure of this new reality. The anger, the fear, the uncertainty, these are the immediate, palpable consequences felt by the people whose lives have been irrevocably altered by this decision. The question is no longer if things will change, but how profoundly and how quickly. Beijing's consolidations. The march of integration. For the leadership in Beijing, Taiwan's acceptance of the offer represents the potential fulfillment of a core national objective. It is framed internally not as a conquest, but as a long-awaited return, a correction of historical injustice. The immediate focus from Beijing is likely on consolidating control and managing the integration process, carefully calibrated to minimize unrest while asserting authority. This is not a sudden brute force occupation, though the threat remains. It is a strategic, deliberate absorption. The initial steps from Beijing would likely involve sending delegations to Taiwan, ostensibly for consultation and planning, but in reality, to begin the process of establishing mainland presence and oversight. Key areas would be targeted first: infrastructure, communication networks, financial systems, and security apparatus. Beijing would seek to gain access to sensitive data, integrate Taiwanese systems with mainland ones, and establish control over critical infrastructure. Taiwanese officials would be pressured, perhaps subtly at first, to align with Beijing's directives, with promises of continued roles for patriotic individuals and the sidelining of those deemed resistant. Economically, Beijing would likely dangle incentives, increase trade access, investment opportunities, while simultaneously beginning the process of integrating Taiwan's highly advanced economy, particularly its semiconductor industry, into the mainland's supply chains and strategic plans. This integration would give Beijing unprecedented access to cutting-edge technology and reduce its vulnerability to external pressure in this critical sector. However, it also presents immense challenges, given the vastly different economic and legal systems. Managing this complex merger without disrupting global supply chains and triggering capital flight from Taiwan would be a delicate balancing act. Politically, the long-term goal is the full integration of Taiwan into the PRC's governance structure. This would likely involve the gradual dismantling of Taiwan's democratic institutions. While initial promises might be made about retaining some local governance structures, the ultimate authority would reside in Beijing. This could manifest as the appointment of mainland officials to key positions, the introduction of mainland laws and regulations, and the eventual dissolution of independent Taiwanese bodies like the Legislative Yuan and the independent judiciary. The timeline for this would depend on the level of resistance encountered, but the direction would be clear and irreversible from Beijing's perspective. Ideological control is also paramount. Beijing would aggressively promote its narrative of peaceful reunification, emphasizing shared cultural heritage and economic prosperity. Media outlets in Taiwan would face immense pressure to align their reporting with Beijing's line, potentially through direct acquisition, censorship, or the creation of parallel state-controlled media. Educational curricula would be revised to reflect Beijing's historical perspective and political ideology. Dissent would be met with increasingly harsh measures, mirroring the tactics used in mainland China and Hong Kong: surveillance, censorship, and the targeting of activists, journalists, and anyone perceived as undermining the new order. The presence of the PLA in and around Taiwan would likely increase, shifting from a posture of potential invasion to one of internal security and control. Military bases could be established, and patrols intensified, signaling Beijing's undisputed authority over the island's territory and surrounding waters. This militarization would serve to suppress internal dissent and deter any external interference. This process of consolidation will be systematic and relentless. It is not merely about flags and anthems. It is about the fundamental restructuring of society, law, economy, and thought under the centralized control of the Chinese Communist Party. The path to full integration, while potentially phased, represents a profound transformation for Taiwan, replacing a vibrant, independent democracy with a system fundamentally incompatible with its recent history and identity. Beijing's objective is clear: make the new reality irreversible, demonstrate the success of peaceful reunification, and solidify its regional dominance. The international reckoning. A world order trembles. The reverberations of Taiwan's acceptance extend far beyond the shores of the island and the mainland. The international community, caught off guard by the speed and nature of the development, is now facing a profound reckoning with the implications for global stability, economic interdependence, and the future of democratic norms. The geopolitical landscape, long shaped by the delicate balance surrounding Taiwan, has fundamentally shifted. For the United States, Taiwan has been a critical element of its Indo-Pacific strategy for decades. The Taiwan Relations Act committed the U.S. to providing Taiwan with the means to defend itself, operating under a policy of strategic ambiguity regarding direct military intervention in the event of an invasion. Taiwan's acceptance of Beijing's offer, bypassing the need for military conflict, presents Washington with a complex and arguably unprecedented challenge. The U.S. commitment was to Taiwan's defense against coercion or attack. What is the U.S. response when Taiwan itself agrees to integration, albeit perhaps under duress? The U.S. loses a key democratic partner, a strategically vital location on the first island chain, and faces questions about the credibility of its commitments to other allies in the region, like Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. The loss of Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing capacity, integrated into China's system, poses a significant economic and national security risk. The U.S. response will likely involve reassessing alliances, accelerating efforts to secure supply chains outside of China, and potentially increasing its military presence in the wider region to deter further assertive actions by Beijing. Japan in particular views Taiwan's status with immense concern due to its geographical proximity and economic ties. The prospect of Chinese military presence expanding closer to its southern islands is a significant security threat. Japan's defense posture and its alliance with the U.S. will be directly impacted. Similarly, Australia and other nations in the Indo-Pacific will be forced to recalibrate their strategies and relationships with both Beijing and Washington. The acceptance could embolden Beijing in its territorial claims in the South China Sea and elsewhere, sensing a diminished willingness or capacity of other nations to resist its expansionist ambitions. Economically, the integration of Taiwan into China's system has colossal implications. Taiwan is a global powerhouse, especially in the manufacturing of advanced semiconductors. Its integration brings a significant portion of the world's critical chip production under Beijing's control. This gives China immense leverage over global technology supply chains, potentially allowing it to favor its own industries, restrict access for geopolitical rivals, or use access as a tool of foreign policy. Nations and corporations worldwide are scrambling to understand the potential disruptions and dependencies created by this shift. Diversification of supply chains, already a priority for many, will become an urgent imperative. The erosion of democracy in Taiwan sends a chilling message globally. It is seen by many as a setback for democratic values and a win for authoritarianism. It raises questions about the ability of smaller democracies to withstand pressure from powerful authoritarian neighbors and the willingness of the international community to effectively support them. The precedent set here could embolden authoritarian regimes elsewhere to pursue their territorial claims or suppress internal dissent, believing the international community will ultimately prioritize stability or economic interests over democratic principles. International organizations, like the UN, will face pressure regarding Taiwan's status, with Beijing likely pushing for its full recognition as an internal affair of the PRC, further isolating any remaining voices advocating for Taiwanese self-determination. The international reckoning is not just about geopolitics and economics, it is about the fundamental principles that have underpinned the post-World War II global order, national sovereignty, self-determination, and the peaceful resolution of disputes. Taiwan's acceptance of Beijing's offer, under whatever circumstances, challenges these principles and forces the world to confront a stark new reality where power, politics, and strategic leverage appear to have overridden democratic aspirations. The world order trembles, contemplating the seismic shifts that this single event has unleashed. The long shadow, what becomes of next? With Taiwan's acceptance now a stark reality, the question, what happens next, transitions from immediate shock to the chilling projection of the future. The integration process will unfold under a long shadow, cast by the loss of sovereignty and the imposition of a fundamentally different political system. What becomes of next is a gradual, systematic transformation, the full effects of which will likely take years, perhaps even decades, to become fully apparent. For the people of Taiwan, next means living under increasing surveillance and control. Freedom of expression, assembly, and the press, cornerstones of their democratic life, will be progressively curtailed. Internet access may be filtered, social media monitored, and criticism of the mainland regime subject to increasingly severe penalties. The vibrant political discourse that characterized Taiwan will be suppressed, replaced by a single, state-approved narrative. legal protections will diminish as Taiwan's independent judiciary is either absorbed into or overridden by the mainland legal system, which prioritizes the party's authority over individual rights. The ability to protest or organize will be severely limited, met with a security apparatus answerable to Beijing. Economically, while initial promises of prosperity might materialize for some sectors integrated into the mainland economy, the long-term picture is one of diminishing autonomy. Taiwanese companies may face pressure to relocate operations to the mainland, share technology, and align their business practices with Beijing's directives. Capital controls could be imposed, restricting the free movement of funds. The unique entrepreneurial spirit and global connectivity that define Taiwan's economy could be stifled, as decisions are increasingly dictated by strategic priorities in Beijing rather than market forces. The potential for brain drain, as educated and skilled Taiwanese seek opportunities elsewhere, is significant. Culturally, next, involves a concerted effort to promote Chinese identity and history as defined by Beijing. Educational materials will be revised to emphasize Taiwan's historical ties to the mainland and downplay its distinct identity and democratic journey. Cultural exchanges will be encouraged, but primarily those that promote Beijing's narrative. Traditional Taiwanese culture, while perhaps superficially tolerated, may find itself marginalized or subtly altered to conform to mainland norms. The goal is not necessarily to erase Taiwanese identity entirely, but to redefine it as a regional subset of a larger unified Chinese identity under the PRC. For Beijing, next is about demonstrating the success of this model of integration both internally and externally. Internally, it is a powerful propaganda tool, showcasing the reunification as a national triumph and validating the party's leadership. Externally, it serves as a warning and a template. It signals to other regions with potential separatist tendencies that Beijing's will is paramount and its methods can be effective without necessarily resorting to overt military conflict, though that threat remains implicit. It also sets a precedent for how China might seek to resolve other territorial disputes or project its influence. The global next is a recalibration of power and influence. The strategic advantage gained by Beijing is immense. The credibility of democratic alliances is tested. The reliance of the world on critical supply chains centered in a region now under increased authoritarian control is a stark vulnerability. The international community will have to navigate a new geopolitical reality where China's leverage is significantly enhanced. This includes potential shifts in trade relationships, technological competition, and the balance of military power in the Indo-Pacific. The long shadow cast by Taiwan's acceptance is one of uncertainty and profound change. It is the story of a vibrant democracy facing gradual absorption, a regional power balance fundamentally altered, and a world grappling with the implications of a shift that was long feared but perhaps not fully anticipated in this form. What happens next is a slow, complex unfolding, marked by the erosion of freedoms, the consolidation of power, and the reshaping of national and global identities under the weight of a new geopolitical order. The echoes of choice dake. Reflecting on the path taken. As the dust begins to settle on the immediate shock of Taiwan's acceptance, the echoes of the choice itself resonate, prompting deep reflection on the circumstances that led to this moment and the wider lessons the world must absorb. This was not a decision made in a vacuum. It was the culmination of decades of complex geopolitics, unrelenting pressure, and the agonizing weight of potential conflict. The decision highlights the stark realities faced by smaller nations, situated in the proximity of rising superpowers with territorial ambitions. Taiwan's economic vulnerability, despite its technological prowess and its dependence on international supply chains and markets, provided Beijing with significant leverage. The relentless military buildup across the strait served as a constant, undeniable threat, shaping the risk calculus in Taipei. The perceived consistency and intensity of Beijing's pressure versus the perceived wavering or limitations of international support may have factored heavily into the final agonizing decision. It also forces a difficult examination of the concept of deterrence. For years, the strategy was to make the cost of an invasion too high for Beijing. But what happens when the pressure is applied through non-military means? Economic coercion, diplomatic isolation, information warfare. and offers that, while fundamentally compromising sovereignty, are presented as an alternative to annihilation. This event suggests that deterrence needs to evolve to address a broader spectrum of pressure tactics. Furthermore, the internal dynamics within Taiwan cannot be ignored. While a strong majority favored maintaining the status quo or moving towards formal independence, there were also voices concerned about the economic costs of confrontation and the human cost of war. Generational divides, political factionalism, and differing assessments of the realistic possibilities contributed to the complex internal landscape. The acceptance suggests that at some level, a critical mass within the decision-making structure came to believe that the path of continued resistance was no longer viable or too dangerous to pursue. The event serves as a cautionary tale about the fragility of democratic gains in the face of determined authoritarian pressure. Taiwan's democracy was hard-won, a vibrant example for the region and the world. Its potential diminishment or absorption into an authoritarian system underscores the need for constant vigilance, robust international support, and proactive strategies to defend democratic values wherever they are threatened. The world must now confront the implications of allowing a major democratic entity to be absorbed by an authoritarian power, regardless of the specific mechanism. What does this signal to other authoritarian regimes with territorial ambitions or desires to suppress dissent? What precedent does it set for the international community's response to similar situations? The echoes of this choice will shape not only the future of cross-strait relations, but also the broader dynamics of international relations, the balance between state sovereignty and human rights, and the ongoing struggle between democratic and authoritarian models of governance. Reflecting on the path taken by Taiwan, and the path now unfolding before it, is essential for understanding the complex and often brutal realities of geopolitics. It is a moment that demands sober analysis, a recognition of difficult choices made under immense pressure, and a critical assessment of how the international community responds to such profound shifts in the global order. The echoes of this decision will resonate for a long time. The future is no longer what it was just days, hours, moments ago. Taiwan's acceptance of China's offer has irrevocably altered the course of history. A chapter of democratic independence, of a distinct national identity, is closing, and a new uncertain era of integration under Beijing's authority is beginning. The consequences will be felt acutely by the people of Taiwan, whose lives, freedoms, and aspirations face profound transformation. They will be felt across the Indo-Pacific as the regional balance of power shifts dramatically. And they will be felt globally, impacting economies, challenging democratic norms, and reshaping the very fabric of international relations. The world watches, stunned, anxious, and grappling with a new reality. The questions posed at the outset: what was the offer? Why now? What happens next? Have been explored, revealing layers of pressure, consequence, and uncertainty. The peace that may have been secured, if indeed it is peace, comes at a price that is only now beginning to be fully understood. The strategic victory claimed by Beijing marks a significant moment in the unfolding geopolitical contest of the 21st century. Understanding this complex news, this monumental global issue, requires more than just headlines. It requires deep analysis, historical context, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about power, sovereignty, and the future of freedom in a rapidly changing world. This is not the end of the world issue of Taiwan. It is a terrifying new beginning. What do you think? Is this a bold step toward a stronger partnership, or could it pull the Taiwan into deeper geopolitical tensions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into global affairs. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.